Hey everyone, welcome to Left Hand Reviews episode 6, and today by popular demand we're going to take a look at Arkadia. Arkadia was released in 2006, plays in about 60 to 75 minutes with 2 to 4 players, and it's primarily a set collection and tile placement game. In 2007 it was actually nominated for the BGG Golden Geek Awards under the Best Family Game category and the Best Gamers Game category. The designer of Arkadia is actually Rudiger Dorn, which if you've been watching any of my other videos, you know that he's the designer of one of my favorite Euros, Goa. So check out that video if you're interested in Goa. Arkadia is a great little game, so let's open it up, take a look at the components, I'll show you how it plays, and then I'll tell you what I think. Arkadia comes in a relatively standard sized box, the wide thin variety. It's a little bit smaller than the Tikal box. First thing we'll see here is the full color rules booklet. It's very clear with plenty of pictures. It's actually in multiple languages, that's why it's so thick, but the English section is only a few pages. We have a castle piece here, which will go in the center of the board. Each player has a player screen, which will shield all of their pieces from your opponents, and also has a nice detailed player turn on the back. A nice board where you will be playing all your pieces. Here we have the seals of the different families within the game. All the workers, which there are workers for each player, and there's also the beige neutral workers. You have your small-sized cards here, which represent all the different buildings and are what you use to place buildings. Architect banners, which are used for scoring. A bunch of gold in denominations of 1, 5, and 10, I believe. These equate to points in the end of the game. You're going to be exchanging those seals for gold. All your building tiles here. It reminds me a lot of Princes of Florence because you have different building tiles of different shapes and sizes that you need to fit on your board. And finally, the castle pieces, which are a really neat little plastic piece with a specific colored seal on top, and they stack on top of each other throughout the game. So let's set up a game and I will show you how it plays. So in this game, we're going to be building up the fledgling city of Arkadia. There are 4 main families in the city that are going to be contributing the wealth to the city to build it. The red is represented by the cloth merchants, olive is the spice merchants, silver is the silversmiths, and black represents the carpenters. Now, in addition to building the buildings around Arkadia, they also need to be building up the castle. So what they have done is hired us, who are architects, that will be designing the castle. So at the top here you see the architect tents here with the architect banners hanging on the tents. Each player starts with 4 cards and 3 workers of their color. I've placed these in front of the architect tents just so you can see them, but normally all this would be hidden from other players. Down on the bottom here we have the cards, which is laid out a la Ticket to Ride with a draw deck and 3 face up. And you have each of the various buildings. We have the smithy, the residential home, the monastery, the farm, the trade center, the tavern, and finally the mill. On the left-hand side, we have the gold, which I said it corresponds to victory points at the end. You have additional workers and the beige neutral workers. And you have the seals that correspond to the colors of all the families. On your turn, a player has 2 different actions they can take. A player can either place a building tile down or place 1 or more workers. If you choose to place a building, you will select one of the cards from your hand and you'll place the corresponding building onto the board. So let's say this particular person wanted to play the tavern. So they would reveal the tavern card, they would take a tavern building tile, and they place it on the board. The buildings have to be placed either vertically or horizontally, in other words orthogonally, to either workers that are already on the board or buildings that are already on the board. In the first placement of the game, the only thing we have on the board is the castle, which counts as a building, so it must be placed adjacent to the castle, say here, or here, or here. You'll also notice on the board there are these tent spaces. If you place a building in such a location that it covers a tent space, that's how you gain a neutral worker. So let's say this player wanted to place this building here. It covers up one tent piece, so they would take a beige worker and add it to their pool. Now, the player used this card to place the tavern, and this has a black seal on it, which corresponds to the carpenter family. So after they place that building, they'll take a black seal and place it on the building to show that that building belongs to the carpenters. Then this card is discarded, and they immediately replenish a card from the stack here. They can either draw from a face-down card or draw one of the face-up cards. If a player decides to place their workers, they can place one or more of their workers, including any combination of their own color workers or the neutral workers. So let's say it's now Purple's turn, and Purple decides to place workers. Purple can place workers anywhere adjacent to an existing building, in the same way that building tiles are placed. So let's say Purple decides to place all three of their workers. So they will be placed either horizontally or vertically adjacent to existing buildings. If you place a worker on a camp space, you do not get a neutral worker. Neutral workers are only obtained by placing a building on a campsite space. So the player would place their pieces, and that would end their turn. Now let's say it's Yellow's turn again, and Yellow decides to place this building here. So they'll grab the corresponding building, in this case a residential house, and place it orthogonally to an existing building or an existing worker. So they could place it on the castle here, or they can place it orthogonally to an existing worker, so say right here. Since it is orthogonal to this worker, that's a legal placement. And they would place a red seal corresponding to the cloth merchants onto the building. And this will continue until a scoring round is triggered. So at the end of your turn, in which you place the building or place workers, you can spend one of your architect banners to trigger a scoring round. And I'll get to that in a minute. Now it's Yellow's turn. And let's say Yellow decides to place more workers. And let's say they'll put them here. Now we notice that this particular building here has been completely surrounded by workers. In that case, a payout phase is triggered. So what will happen is that the player that completed the surrounding of the building, in this case Yellow, will take this black seal, or whatever seal color happens to be on that building, and add it to their pool. Then they will also get an additional seal of that color for each worker that they have surrounding the building, in this case 2. So they would take 2 black seals and add it to their pool. Purple would also get a payout, and they would get 1, 2, 3 black seals. The neutral worker here does not provide any seals. They're just a way of completing buildings. In addition to collecting seals, when a building is completely surrounded, the player that surrounded the building is able to grab one of the castle tiles. So in phase 1 of the game, we're going to be grabbing from these tiles here. And they can choose any color, not necessarily the color of the seals that were just taken. So let's say, in this case, the yellow player will decide to take black because they have several black seals already. And I'll explain in a minute why that's important. And they will then place the castle piece anywhere on the castle, in any of these spaces around it, and they can cover up an existing color as well. So let's say they decide to place this here. And that will end their turn. I mentioned earlier that at the end of your turn, you can decide to play an architect banner. So let's say in this case Yellow decides to play one of their architect banners. So this leaves the game, and they immediately get 2 workers of their color back. That is the only way to get additional workers, so you need to be careful. Then what they will do is complete an evaluation of the castle for themselves only, so no other players participate. And what they do is, this is when they convert their family seals into gold, and gold is those victory points. Now the value of each seal corresponds to the number of tiles of the corresponding seal color in the castle. So what you'll do is look top down at the castle and see how many of a particular color there is. So in this case, yellow only has black seals, so they want to cash in their black seals. And you can choose how many you want to cash in. Let's say they want to cash all 3 in. So from a top-down perspective, we can see 1, 2, 3 black seals visible. So each one of the black seals will be worth 3 gold. So they cash in all 3 seals for 9 gold. So they'll take a 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4 ones. And that is how the evaluation works. Now during the game, as buildings are placed and surrounded, we're going to be placing more and more castle pieces on the board. And that's where the trick comes in. You want to be covering up castle colors of seals that you think your opponents have more of. So if your opponent you think is collecting lots of red seals, you're going to want to cover up those red seals with a color that you have more seals of, because that makes their payout less and yours hopefully greater. So throughout the turn, you're going to be placing these castle pieces as the board fills up. And you can only place a castle piece onto the first level, meaning you cannot start stacking pieces. So let's say all these castle pieces are now placed. The second that this final castle piece is placed on the first level, the 2 remaining pieces will go over here and will be used in phase 3. And we now start phase 2 of the castle build, where we're going to be doing the same thing as before, placing cards and workers. But this time, you are now going to be building on the second level of the castle. And again, scoring and all that will work the same way. So let me set up a more complicated scoring example that would simulate something later in the game, and we'll take a look at it. So let's say it's later in the game now, and this isn't going to be totally accurate because as the castle's built up this far, there's actually going to be a lot more pieces on the board. But I just wanted to demonstrate a more complicated scoring. So let's say it's yellow's turn and yellow decides to place workers. So they're going to place 1 worker here and 1 worker here. Now you can see what I've just done is yellow has completed this building and this building, so both will score, and yellow can choose in what order. So let's say this one first. So yellow, since they completed the building, will collect this red seal, and they will also collect 1, 2, 3 more red seals. Purple also has a worker on this particular building, so they will collect 1 red seal. This building has also been completed, so they will collect this olive seal and 1, 2, 3 more olive seals. And purple will collect 1 olive seal. Now you probably noticed that this worker was very handy because it scored them a seal for this building, and that's where a lot of the strategy of the game comes in. You want to place workers in places where they can score multiple buildings, and in such a way to block other players from being able to place workers that would score them multiple buildings. So this was a great move for yellow, because even though purple did get some seals, yellow got many more. Since they also completed a building, in this case they would get to place, 2 buildings, so they would get to place 2 castle pieces. Now, in this case there's only 1 castle piece left to place in the second level, so they would only place 1. And let's say because they have a lot of the olive seals, they're going to place an olive castle piece here. Yellow has now completed the second level of the castle, so the remaining 2 pieces will go here into phase 3, and this triggers the end of the game. Each player will now have 1 and only 1 more turn left. And the player that completed the second level of the castle, in this case yellow, would get the final turn. So purple will go 1 more time, and yellow will go. Now, it's important to keep in mind your architect banners here, because you cannot use architect banners at the end of the game. You have to use them before the end of the game, because there will then be 1 final scoring. So you need to be using these banners to collect more workers to place, and you need to make sure you use them up before the end of the game to maximize the number of points, or in other words, in gold, that you can get. So let's say yellow had already used 2 of these previously. They completed this turn. They're going to use their last one. So then they can choose what seals to cash in. And you don't have to cash in all of them, but you can. So in this case, let's say they're just going to cash in their olive seals. Let's look at the top. 1, 2, 3 olive seals are showing. So each one of these seals is worth 3 points. They'll cash these in and collect an amount of gold equal to that. Now, for the last round of the game, you can place castle pieces, if you so choose to place castle pieces, on the 3rd level of the temple, or of the castle rather. Now, once each player has completed 1 more turn, then final scoring is conducted, and that's will happen with just all the players cashing in all their seals for now what is currently shown on the castle. So yellow would cash in their red seals for a value of 2 gold each, and the silver ones at 3 gold each. Everyone will collect all their gold for all their seals and add up all their gold. Whoever has the most gold now is crowned the winner of the game. So that's a game of Arkadia. What do I think? Well, I think Arkadia is a fantastic game. Rudiger Dorn is an excellent designer, as I mentioned before, my love of Goa, and he really did a great job on this game. There's a lot of great pieces. The artwork is really nice. These plastic castle pieces are great. There's a lot of strategy in this game, despite the rule set being relatively simplistic. There's only those 2 actions that you can take, placing workers, placing a building. But despite that, there is a tremendous amount of strategy in your placement of workers and the placement of castle pieces to maximize your return. And there's a lot of different strategic methods to the game. You want to make sure you don't run out of workers, but also you want to make sure you don't have workers at the end of the game because they're worth nothing. You don't necessarily want to be placing buildings using cards that have seals of the most valuable color, because then everyone's going to be going after it. You need to keep track of what the other players are doing and see what kind of seals they're collecting and what castle pieces they're placing on the castle, and you want to try to combat that with the buildings that you place and what colors you cover up on the castle. So there's a lot going on. What I really enjoy about this game is it's really, really easy to teach. It's I would almost call this a gateway game because it's easy to teach, anybody can get into it, and it's a lot of fun. Another great aspect of this game is it scales really well for 2 to 4 players. So whether you only have 2 people, you want to play it with your husband or wife or significant other, or just a friend, it's great. If you want to bring it to a game meetup and play with 4 players, it works equally well in my opinion. And there's also in the rules, there's also some ways that you can make it even easier to pick up, such as starting with additional neutral workers and things like that. So overall, I think Arkadia is a fantastic game. It's a little bit on the older side. I'm not sure that it's in print anymore, but I think you can pick it up at some of the online retailers still for a very reasonable price. So if I was you, I would definitely give this one a play. It's a great game. So give it a try. Thanks for watching.